Parshas Matos-Masei, we learn about a story that we have to understand. So just first, before we get to the Ari, and before we get to the Baal Shem, to just read the Pshat and see the story, what it is, understand what happened. So basically, the story is like this. This is the end of the journey. This is the end of Bamidbar. So Klal Yisrael leaves Mitzrayim, and they're traveling to get to the destination. They get to Mount Torah, and then eventually they're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. That's the tafkid. That's the tachlis. That's the journey is going to get to the destination to get into Eretz Yisrael. So they're journeying, and then there was a detour. Instead of going right away into Eretz Yisrael, they end up being 40 years in Galus, 40 years in the Midbar, and finally they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael. It's the end of Moshe's life, and a very strange thing happens. What's the strange thing happens? The strange thing is that there is two shvatim, two tribes, Reuven and Gad. We'll see how Menashe fits into the story, but Reuven and Gad, these are two prominent shvatim. Reuven is the Reishis Oini of Yaakov, the firstborn, and Gad, who's the firstborn of Silpa. And they come to Moshe Rabbeinu and they tell him that the Miknav Hoyel of Reuven Gad Atzim Oid, and they see the land on the other side of across the Jordan River, and they say, we would like to settle there. You know, instead of going to Eretz Yisrael, instead of going into the land, we would like to land and across the river. It doesn't make sense on any level. You're waiting for 40 years to get into Eretz Yisrael. This is the destiny of Klal Yisrael, to get into Eretz Yisrael. And right when you get to Eretz Yisrael, you say, you know what, we have a lot of sheep. And, we need a lot of place to graze, so we should have this land across the river. And this is what they tell Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe gets upset, and it says, your brothers are going to go to battle to go conquer the land. You're going to be sitting across the land. How could you dishearten the people to go across the land? And he says this is basically says this is the same thing that what the Meraglim did, the same story of the spies. And Moshe became angry at them. And they kamtem tachas avesechem tarbas anoshim, that you're basically standing in the same place of your ancestors, that the spies also didn't go into Eretz Yisrael, and you don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. You didn't learn your lesson. Vayigishu elov, so they come to Moshe and they tell him, no, let us build places for our lots, and we'll go into Eretz Yisrael. We'll conquer the land with everyone else, and then we'll go back across the river to go settle there. And Moshe goes ahead with this plan. Moshe says, if that's what you do, okay, fine. Then you have a part across the land of the other side of the river. Now, the truth is a few things. What actually happened here does it mean that Moshe misunderstood them? Well, that was their original plan. They were originally saying that we were going to go to Eretz Yisrael. We're going to do the fight. We're going to do battle with everyone else. We're also going to go in. And Moshe simply did not understand correctly what they were saying. It sounded like they just want to settle across the land and not do anything, just stay there. And this seems to be suggested by the Ramban, and Abarbanel goes according to this opinion. Or it seems to be that it's possible that after Moshe gets upset at them, they say, you know what, if you're upset because you say that we're not going to go into the land, and therefore we're going across the land, we're going to discourage everyone else from going into the land, so we'll do exactly what you said. We'll also go fight. We'll fight. If this is what you really want, so we'll fight for them, and then we'll stay across the land. And this is where the Baal learns this pshat. That it's basically they decided after they heard from Moshe that he's upset, but it still doesn't answer the question. Why do they want the land? Why do they want the other side of the land? Now, another interesting thing is that if you look at what we're not going to talk about is that when they refer to their cattle, they say mikna. They keep on saying the word mikna. When Moshe refers to their cattle or to their itzoyim, he changes the word. So there's something about that. But the real question is, why Reuven, why Gad? Okay, so technically you can say Reuven, Gad, because they had a lot of cattle. But then the question is, so why do they have a lot of cattle? Why specifically Reuven? Why specifically Gad? And what is their intention really of going on the other side of the river? It seems to be inconsistent with the entire project, that they're going to Eretz Yisrael, and they want to get to Eretz Yisrael, and it feels like that they get to that destination. Also, the question is, how does Menashe fall in there? Menashe. Half of Menashe falls in. Now, originally it's Reuven and Gad, or Gad and Reuven, depends. Okay, so these shvatim come to Moshe and say we want to go to we want to stay on the other side of the river. We don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. At the end, Moshe says, okay, fine, when they finally agreed to the condition, the Tanai, when they got the Reuven, when they finally agreed to that condition, he says, okay, but Chatz Sheva Menashe is also going to go in. Why is Chatz Sheva Menashe? What does Chatz Sheva Menashe have to do with this? They were not part of the original deal. Reuven and God came to Moshe Rabbeinu, not Menashe. So the Even Ezer says that they were always there, but it was a Chatz Sheva. It was only half a Shevet, so they were small, so they didn't mention them.
Why do you mention them now?
Because now when it's finally telling who's actually going, so he gives a description. This is what the Even Ezer says. Well, this is a tzarech here. This is very hard to understand, this pshat. The Medrash says that Menashe is punished. That Menashe is punished because he caused the Shvatim by the sale of Yosef when he came to tell them that he caused that the brothers should rip their garments when they felt that they're being chased. So therefore his Shevet was ripped in two. Or Menashe actually shows Chvivas Eretz Yisrael. You have the story that Menashe is Bnei Slavchader from Menashe, and they show that they have Chvivas Eretz Yisrael. They actually like Eretz Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu is sending them to counter their lack of Chvivas Eretz Yisrael, that they don't like Eretz Yisrael. Moshe says, okay, I'm going to send the tribe that actually likes Eretz Yisrael. But there's something specifically about these particular Shvatim, and to understand this, we first understand a little bit what is the idea of Eretz Yisrael. So first from the Ari, very quickly, in Shar Psukim, we'll read what the AriZal has to say. So the AriZal starts like this. Tzarech l'das, we have to understand, this is Shar Psukim, Siman Lamed Beis. We have to understand. We have to understand why God and Reuven and half of Menashe get their portion of the land of Israel on the other side of the river, not in Israel the way it was eventually conquered. To also understand what is Eretz Yisrael and what is the land of Israel, what is Evayard, and what is from across the Jordan. What does that represent? So Eretz Yisrael, first let's read the Oasis. Eretz Yisrael, he nukva dezah. Eretz Yisrael is nukva dezah. What does nukva dezah mean? So we're talking about Zod Atzilus. So let's just say like this, that there is the manifestation of physical reality, of physical form, begins in the world of Bria. So it's the beginning of Bria is when the world exists as like Bereshis bara is Bria. When there's an externalization, that's the world of Bria. We're not talking about levels. We're talking about processes. There's a process that the world exists as a tsura, like a potential. Let's say koychayuli, like a potential. Then it starts actualizing until it becomes formed in the material world. So the general idea of Bri Yitzir Asiya, which we spoke a few times, is basically the formation of how the world is coming into existence until it becomes something which is Asiya in the physical manifestation the way it is now. The way the world exists in the world of Atzilus is the way the world exists in its conception. So Atzilus would be like the way when you create something, first it exists within your mind, and then it exists outside. So first it exists as a word, and then maybe as an action, and you're externalizing the idea that exists within your mind. So the way the world exists in the world of Atzilus, which is called Eitzel or Netzel, something that's close, is the way the world exists, Kaviyachol, in the mind of the Creator. Okay, so it's like the idea of the world, and then eventually there's a manifestation of the world. So the way the world exists within its conception is the way the world exists within Ein Atzilus. So Ein Atzilus is the pristine possibility of the way the world could exist. In Olam Atzilus itself, there is sort of every world has the 10 spheres. So in the Olam Atzilus itself, there'll be the more theoretical part of the theoretical, which would be like the Chabad of Atzilus. And that's why generally Bina is connected to Chacham is connected to Olam Atzilus. That it's the thought of the thought, the way it exists in the world of thought. And then there is the way it still exists within the thought, but it's existing within a malchus. So I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say you have an idea for something, right? right? You have a new, let's say, a new business thing you want to do. You want to start something. So there's first, let's say, or a new song you want to create. I don't know, whatever you want to do. The first is there's the intuition, some type of chachma of what this idea should look like, but it doesn't yet have malchus. It's not yet actually really formed in your mind even. It's not yet formed in your mind. And slowly it goes through a process until you actually say, okay, that's the idea. I got it. That's already the way the full idea becomes the malchus of that. What?
Isn't that Bina?
No, Bina is that you still developing it in your mind. But malchus is already when it's completely in its form, almost the way you see it. So you let's say you have an idea, right? And this is a creative idea, and then this is the way you're going to build this structure, and malchus is the way it's already built in your mind.
That's malchus.
That's malchus datzilus kaviyachal. Correct. So you understand? One is still in the thought. They're all in the thought. Let's just be. They're all within atzilus, so they're all within the thought. But within the thought itself, there's sometimes you finish something, a product, and you actually finish it. That's like it's completed. That's the malchus of the idea. That's
You have the complete idea developed.
complete idea developed and ready to be served. Right? That's already its malchus. It's ready to move on to the next world, to be manifest within the world of Bria, which is already an externalization of that idea. Okay, so the malchus is like is like the earth. Ki'ilu is like the ground or the earth of the concept, where the thing becomes like earthy. It becomes it's actually a tangible thing, that it can give birth to something. So there's nukva the Zohar Ampen of Atzilus means it's the nukva of Zohar Ampen, but it's an Atzilus. So Eretz Yisrael, when we talk about a land,
Is that Malchus?
it's Malchus. Yeah, it's Malchus.
There's malchus in every part of, in every olam.
Why doesn't he call it Malchus? That's it. Why is it?
Okay, I'll explain you why. It's not Malchus. It's not Malchus Atzilus. In other words, there's different partsufim. There's the parts of. There's a different partsufim. So this is going to be the parts of a nukva of Zohar Ampen. So there's the parts of the full persona of Chachma, which is Ima, the full persona of Abba, the full persona parts of Abina, which is Ima, right? So it's the full parts of which each has 10. In the lowest form, where the way it's going to be revealed in the physical realm is already the nukva of it. Right, so that's like the lowest level of the nukva in Atzilus, but it's the nukva of the Atzilus that also has 10 spheres.
You're saying as opposed to the malchus, which
Everything has
that one.
No, malchus. No. So when you talk about spheres, you have to understand something like this. You can talk about spheres as individual units. This is the way the Ramak talks about spheres. There's Chesed, there's Gvura, Tiferes. Each sphere has its own sphere. One of the Chidushim of the AriZal, one of the things that he explains by Arichas, one of the big Chidushim, is that every 10 has 10. Each one. So when you talk about the parts of Nukva, we're actually talking about that they're all Nukva because it's all.
Nukva is not a sphere then.
Nukva is a parts of. Correct.
It's just a different alignment.
Yeah, the Nukva is like it's interchangeable with the sphere of Malchus, but it's considered a full parts of, and the Nukva, the full parts of Nukva has 10 spheres.
What's the difference between Nukva and Malchus then?
Because when you're talking about Malchus, you're generally referring to the particular sphere of Malchus. When you're talking about the parts of, you call it the parts of Nukva. In other words, when you talk about Malchus as an individual quality, it's syntax. It's very delicate, but it's really mamish. It's almost the same thing. He's trying to say is like, in simple language, it's saying like this: Eretz Yisrael is a manifestation of something that is earth. It's like a container. It's holding something that gives birth to a lot of different things. That gives birth to life. It gives birth to Kedusha. It gives birth to Nevuah. This is the Eretz Yisrael. Now, the Oimek of Eretz Yisrael we talked about is really every single place on the earth. But the concentrated place of that Kedusha, that place, is in a particular location, or the Oimek of that particular location. So Eretz Yisrael is the way things arise from this place that allow for the expression of something we'll call Atzilus. In other words, you're sitting here in the ground on Montabella, yeah. So you'll say there's for example, will say that the Medrash and a lot of the Rishonim, most of the Rishonim, right, the Kuzi, many of the Rishonim, right, that Nevuah is only Chol B'Eretz Yisrael. That you can't have prophecy outside of Eretz Yisrael. Yecheskel ben Buzi had a prophecy in Baal. One of the famous prophets Navis had a thing. So he says no, because his Nevuah was about Eretz Yisrael, or he came from Eretz Yisrael, which means that if you're miskasher to something of Eretz Yisrael, you can have Nevuah. But the Eretz Yisrael is the place, the physical space that gives rise for the possibility of the Koyach HaNevui to be revealed. Now, you could be somewhere else and be tapped into the oimik of that. Then you tap into Eretz Yisrael. But that's the Nekuda of Eretz Yisrael. Is a Eretz Yisrael Shetespashat B'chol Aratzis is the Nekuda of all the Aratzis that has the Eretz Yisrael element of it. But that's the Kedusha in that place. But to make it more simple, Eretz Yisrael is the place that gives rise of that possibility. Okay, so you're saying that there's a place called Eretz Yisrael, a physical place called Eretz Yisrael. This physical place is Malchus Datzilus, is Nukva Datzilus. What does it mean that it's Nukva Datzilus? It means that this place gives birth for the possibility to have an Atzilus experience. You're following? You're following? So it's the Nukva, it's the container that holds all of Atzilus and allows, just like the earth, like physically the earth. What is the earth? The earth, you plant something and something grows. So you'll say there's Eretz Megadeles, one thing. The Gemara says there's certain lands that grow one thing and certain lands grow another thing. There's something innate about the land, even though Sadna the Arachadu, really in the deepest level of the earth, everything's the same. But in the particularity of the earth, there's certain earth that gives rise to apple trees and certain earth that gives rise to cabbage. Right? There's Eretz Megadeles. So there's an Eretz Megadeles Nevuah. Huh?
Depends what you plan.
No. Certain climates will not produce the right.
It's not
fruit.
conducive.
It's not conducive. Now you can change. You can manipulate it. You can give it rain when it doesn't rain. But we're saying there's certain cactuses grow in the desert, and orange trees grow in Spain. And, whatever. There's a certain land that gives rise to these type of things. So saying we're in the earth, on this planet Earth is a place that's Megadeles Nevuah. Where does Nevuah come out? Where does this Ruach HaKodesh, where does this higher level of Asari Kedushas come out? That comes out in Eretz Yisrael. So we're saying is that the Eretz Yisrael is the Nukva of Atzilus, which is revealed in the physical realm. That gives allowance for the Atzilus experience to unfold. It's clear, more or less? Now, no, the Kascholos Rosh the Zorampin. Okay, this is very very quick. Kascholos Rosh the Zorampin Machatzi Tiferes the Ema Lamata Lechem Yosef Nukva Gavoy Kamal Dimse Gam Rosh the Nukva Meschils V'Sham Machtes Kaimes Ema La. V'Nimse Kinishar Lamaila Kesev Chachma V'Chatzi Bina. Okay, that. How do we explain this? It's like this. Okay. So you have, let's say, this is very technical things, but it's not. But simply, first of all, you have to get the technicality. You have the 10 spheres here. These are the 10 spheres of Atzilus, right? And then there's the parts of Zohar Ampin. Okay, there's the parts of Abba, parts of Ima. What? Make a picture?
It would help.
Yeah, it would help to have a picture. But let's just imagine here it starts. Okay, here it starts, and then there's parts of Ima, parts of Abba, parts of Arach, parts of Atik. These are hard things. We're not talking about that. Now, when we say the parts of a Zohar Ampin, which is the Midas, the 6 Midas, Chesed Gevurah Tiferes, right? So the parts of a Zohar Ampin, which also has Chochmah Bina Das, right? Kesef Chochmah Bina also has Kesef Chochmah, it's all 10. The parts of a Zohar Ampin starts in midpoint of Bina. You have Keser Chochmah Bina. In Bina there are 10. Right, because every 10 has 10. So in the Tiferes, which is the midpoint of Bina, that's when the Zohar Ampin starts. Now the Zohar Ampin also has 10. So the Zohar Ampin now goes 7.5 down in Atzilus, and then goes 2.5 into Bria. Probably because it has 10. So it starts here. Atzilus starts here. This is starting from this point. So this goes further down where Atzilus ends.
So the midpoint between Tiferes and...
That's what right by Tiferes, yes. Of Bina.
Of Bina, so in between the Netzach...
The sharp nose.
No, it's not the Chazet. It's not the Chazet. It's like very close to the Chazet, but it's not the Chazet. Because that's where the end is. That's where the spheres. That's the spheres of.
But it's in between Tiferes and Netzach?
No, it's not in between. It starts parallel to that point. We're in these spheres of Atzilus. Here starts the Zohar Ampin of Atzilus and goes down to the first 2.5 spheres in Bria.
Okay.
You got it? Okay. Now, this is the technical thing. There's Malchus. Where does Malchus start from? Malchus starts from the Chaza. Malchus Mekoira Ikihu Mechatzi Tiferes de Zah b'Makom HaChaza. That's where you can the Makom HaChaza in the Idra. Malchus starts from the Chatzi Tiferes de Zah, the half of Tiferes of the Zah. So Zohar Ampin, you have Chesed Gevurah Tiferes. Half of Tiferes of Tiferes, that's where Nukva starts. That's where the parts of a Nukva starts. So if the parts of a Nukva starts, I'm going to make this very simple, because if the parts of Nukva starts, midpoint of Tiferes, how much does it leak into the next world?
Tiferes of Zah.
Tiferes of Zah. But no, this is Nukva now. This is the parts of a Nukva. So the parts of a Nukva doesn't have Keser, Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gevurah, half of Tiferes. So now it leaks all the way down to midpoint of Netzach. Because that's where you'll start there and it'll go another 10. It'll go down another 7.5. Till the midpoint of Netzach, to half of Netzach. If it starts at half of Tiferes, then it's going to go to half of Netzach. What do we have? The conclusion of this topic is that we have 3.5 spheres in the world of Bria that Nukva of Atzilus doesn't touch. That's the whole cheshbon. You got it? That's the whole cheshbon. Malchus will always back. The AriZal will say Malchus goes back to Atzilus is not a problem because Malchus it's always going to go back to the highest level. Okay, that's not. We're going to touch it. But we're leaving is that we're going to have that in the world of Bria. There's 7.5 spheres of Bria that are permeated with the Nukva of Atzilus, and 2.5 are not going to be permeated with the Nukva of Atzilus. In very, very simple language, what that AriZal is saying is that Atzilus is the conception of the universe, right? In Atzilus, the world is unified. In the world of unity, that's the place of Nevuah, that's the place of connection, that's the place of Dvekas, that's the highest place. We're not talking about a place, obviously, right? We're talking about an idea. In the world of Atzilus, the Nuk of Atzilus is Eretz Yisrael. But Eretz Yisrael and Atzilus doesn't help the physical world because it has to permeate into the world of Bria. Otherwise, it's just an idea, right? It's just a conception. It's Atzilus. So everything in Atzilus is fine. It has to come down to this world. It has to come into the world of Bria. But because Nukva of Atzilus only enters to the midpoint of Netzach, of Bria, that means that what's transformed in the physical realm of the world of Bria, or not transformed, what's permeated with the oil of Atzilus in the world of Bria is only 7.5. Right? Which leaves 2.5 that are not accessible, which means that is in the world of Bria but has no connection to Elam Atzilus. Did you follow the cheshbon?
Like the beginning of a period?
Yeah, the beginning of the period of Elam Atzilus. Exactly. The beginning of the period starts from the world of Bria is the world of period anyways. That's where period starts from. But because Tovarah begins there, the world begins there, manifestation begins there, physicality begins there, everything begins in the world of Bria. Opposites begin there. Bar is already mechutz, it's something that's external. That's already begins there. Because it already begins there, in the world of Bria, it means the AriZal is saying, in the physical realm, how can we have access to Atzilus? In a very practical way. How can we have access to Atzilus? Now I'm thinking we actually should talk about something else interesting. Because the Baal Shem Tov actually teaches that Daf Connect Chutzlars, you can have bigger Ruach HaKodesh than Bizman HaGalos. That you can have bigger Ruach HaKodesh. Now I'm thinking that's actually very connected to something. We're going to go with a different mahalach over here. But this is what the AriZal is saying. That how could a person in this physical world, in this world of Bria, have an experience of Atzilus? And where is that place for a person to have that experience? That's Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because in the world of Bria, there's the Nukva, there's the parts of the Nukva of Atzilus that's being manifest. And where is it manifest? In the 7.5 only. Which means 2.5 is still on the outside. The 2.5 on the outside is Eva Le'arden.
And that's from the Atzilus.
No. That's from half and that's a Chod Yesod of Bria. And it's not connected to Atzilus. So therefore it's with Eva Le'arden. You understand this? The cheshbon what the AriZal is doing, more or less.
More or less.
More or less. Let's try to. If we strip it away from the oisius of the Ari, he's basically saying in a very, very simple language. If we have to make it very simple, he's saying like this: me and you are sitting in a physical place. How do we have access to something that's spiritual, something that's transcendent of this physical immediacy of life? Okay, you can say there's an neshama. There's a lot of different answers, but one answer is that it's Eretz Megadelas. It's something about the land where you are in this space of this world. Just like there's time, there's Shabbos, there's Yom Tov, there's certain ideas. There's a space, and the space is conducive that allows a person to articulate these qualities. What's the space how is there a possibility for this world to have a space that allows it? Because there's an Eretz, which is a nukva. Eretz is the earth, which is an idea of nukva, which is actually an expression of nukva datzilus. Where is that expression of nukva datzilus? In the 7 spheres, in the 7.5 spheres that's revealed in the world of Bria. Where is that manifest in the physical world? That's Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, in Eretz Yisrael, you can have an experience in a physical place. You can have access to a place that's Olam Atzilus. Ever Yarden, across the other side of the Yarden, on the other side of the river, that's where the Bria stands outside of Atzilus, and therefore you can't have that together on that level of prophecy. This is one part of the puzzle. However, if you read very closely, the AriZal is also saying that there's an aliyah of nukva datzilus. There's a constant aliyah. There's aliyah of Rosh Chodesh. He doesn't say this here, but he's meramis in this idea that when there's an elevation, because he started off, you see that when he says nukva gavoya kebaila? When nukva will be as high as its spouse, then nukva is on the same level of Zohar Ampin. So then where does Zohar Ampin start from? Starts from the middle of Bina, right? The Faris of Bina, which means that there's a possibility that there's a rising of nukva into Atzilus. And which means that there can be even a higher madrega, that the world can be in a more refined form. Which is that there's the world. I'll tell you in Oasis Achsidis, it works almost the opposite, but it's because we're talking about, one is talking about a yerida or an elevation, one is talking about an ascent. In Torah Chassidus would say that the reason for the land of the 7 is a land of the 7 midas, and the land of Eretz K'nei Kiddush Akadmoni, the land of Evel Yarden, is Chachma Bina Das. So we can only access the midas, which means that we function from a place of midas, a place of emotions. Predominantly, we're very reactive people. We respond to things, so we're in an emotional place. So we say the elevation that we can experience in this world generally is connected to the 7. We don't have yet the possibility to fully transform our level of moichin, that we can have full consciousness in a way that we're totally not reactive. Maybe you're a tzaddik, but if you're a tzaddik, it's an unusual thing. But the normal way, the dominant way, feature of human beings is that they're connected to midas, they're not connected to moichin. They're connected to their emotions, not connected to their intelligence, to their mind, and therefore we can elevate the 7. We can't elevate the 3. This is what he says. This is the first nukuda. But hold on to this point for a second, and we're going to go to the next point. We're going to turn the page, and we're going to read something in Sefer HaLikutim. So this is the first idea. So we have a little bit of understanding of what is Eretz Yisrael, what is Evel Yarden. It still didn't answer one of the questions, but this is some of the ideas. So, this is a very, very, very important and interesting term. Soid b'nei God b'nei Reuven v'chatz Shev Menashe. To understand the secret of why God, Reuven, and Menashe did not go into the land of Eretz Yisrael. Soid the inyenu. You should know. Ki Yaakov Avinu alav shalom kishem is davigim Leah hayasava shurachel kenoida. The story is, we're going to say some very big things, and we're talking about the Avos HaKadoshim, so we have to we'll try to understand Keinu. There's something that the Gemara talks about. The Gemara in the Dar and the Chaf, the base, talks about different things. One of the things is called the B'nai Tmura. The B'nai Tmura, in very simple language of the Gemara, is an exchange child, which means that the Gemara says that that when you're when you're drinking one cup, you shouldn't think about another cup. And the Gemara says afilu b'shtei nashav, even if it's your two wives. The Gemara over there talks about intimacy between spouses, and the Gemara basically is saying that when a person is intimate, a male is intimate with a female, which through that we're going to see there's a creation of souls, of neshamas. There's always a creation of neshamas. There's zivug, there's shikin. There's two levels. There's a yichud ilah and yichud tata, or like a higher form of connection, which is through neshikin, which through neshikin are created angels. Malachim are created from neshikin, and through zivug, actual zivug is neshamas are created, souls are created. Angels are created from the more refined form, and physical and malachim are created from the lower intimacy. But that's the place of real yichud. That's the place of real. Now it's always created. Every time something is being created, you're always creating something. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be revealed in actually having a child. Let's say a wife is pregnant or whatever, any situation, whatever, or other times, whatever, in any situation. It doesn't mean that you're always going to have a child from that relationship, which means it doesn't mean you're going to draw down a soul into a body, but you're going to draw down a soul. There's souls that will be drawn down, and we'll have to understand what it means, and there's also angels being drawn down. This is always, every single time there's intimacy. Now, therefore, when there is intimacy, with intimacy is really the idea of a yichud between Yisrael and Malchus. That's what it is. Yisod is basically the outer expression of self, the male expression of Yisod, which is miyachid. It comes into unity with Malchus, which is the receiver. Okay, so that's the idea of there's a yichud between Yisod and Malchus. When there's a yichud between Yisod, a unity between Yisod and Malchus, Yisod generally is the idea of focused, of alignment. Right, that's the whole idea of Yisod, that it's aligning. When there's an expression of Yisod in a way that the Malchus is not properly receiving this Yisod, properly receiving it, because, now of course this can be, it can be, the Gemara talks about, like it could be because there's a fight and you're not, and other situations, b'nei nidu, there's other situations that you're going to happen. But even a b'nei Tmura means that you're not focused. And unfortunately, not only you're not focused, you're actually focusing on somebody else. So, however we understand this, the Torah tells us. So, the Torah tells us that Yaakov works for 7 years for Rachel. Rachel gives Leah the simonim, which means she gives her the signs for the night. And it says, V'hina b'boker v'Leah. And when Yaakov gets up in the morning, and it's in the morning, b'boker, and he finally sees her, he says, V'hina Leah. That is Leah, which means that Yaakov doesn't recognize that it's Leah until the morning. So when Yaakov was together with Leah, he was, in his machshava, in his thought, he was together with Rachel. V'nishmasa shel Reuven, we'll understand this more in a packet. V'nishmasa shel Reuven hoysem misoy dadas. Since the idea of Reuven was supposed to be das, supposed to be connection, and the zivug of Yaakov, the unity of Yaakov with Leah, was shalom das, because he didn't have his das was not present, his das was someplace else. Therefore, didn't go into Eretz Yisrael. Let's just read what he says. And same thing also with God. Fisher God, Yaakov. God was also not with Das Yaakov. Not L'Rishus. Because when Rachel gave Bila her Shivcha to Yaakov, he gave him permission. Because Rachel comes over to Yaakov and says, I cannot have children. Banal Shivchasi, please have children with my maidservant. And therefore, it's as if I'll have children through you. So it was done with intention. Right? That's what that was the connection with Bila. However, when Leah gave Zilpah, why did Zilpah have to be with Yaakov? Leah already had 4 children. So what was the reason? And Yaakov actually thought she was Leah, because why should Yaakov think that he's being with Zilpah? Now you're going to say, he didn't recognize who she was. So there's a fascinating medrash. I saw Menachem Kasher brings it down in Torah Shlema. He brings it down on the Parsha. He says that there's a medrash says that Leah dressed Zilpah in the clothes of Leah. Mamish the same thing. So just like he was tricked the first time thinking it was Rachel because he gave him the Simonim, the same happened with Zilpah. V'nizdavik ima boisa laila. Obogad shlo das. V'agan come say the das. Alkein kadosh my bogad. Chasan she say the das. So it's bogad is bogad like bogad like treason. Yeah. Kshabaz taking a das. This is very quickly. Kshabaz shlo das. Zeh asher is Israel. Alkein lo nichs zvan shel kol asher. Asher is a tikkun. Asher creates a tikkun because God and Asher we created a tikkun. That's right. Rosh. Okay, that's not Negea. Okay, lo nichs zvan shel kol Eretz. So therefore, he doesn't really explain this clearly, but he's saying somehow the fact that this was that case, this didn't allow them to enter into Eretz Yisrael. Who did Yosef marry? Asna Shibaz Dina. And she was Arba Mishchem. V'hoy chatzi klip mitzad Hashem. V'chetzi kedusha mitzad Dina. V'yosef v'kol kedusha. K'shazavigim and Asnas Ne'elu Menashe. V'lochach ima chatzi shev boy. Shemiklip v'lochach aviyah chatzi shev kedusha. Okay. Just hold off a little bit what the AriZal says, and we'll try to understand this a little more. That something over here, something going on here. It's not that they were left out in there. So there's something going on. There's something very fascinating about Reuven. Something very interesting about Reuven. That Reuven, there's 2 episodes in the Torah about Reuven. What are the 2 stories that happen with Reuven? What's the first story? The story of the Daduim and the story with Mechiras Yosef in the bar. Now, in both those stories, Reuven L'chur was right. What was he doing? The first story...
Good intentions.
Exactly. He had good intention. What was the problem? He decided the best idea is the brothers are going to kill his brother. Let's put him into the pit. What did he say? So eventually I'm going to come back. I'm going to get my brother from the pit. Very good intention. The problem is that he was a little bit off the mark. Like he missed it. And that's why he comes back and they sell him and he starts crying and he didn't even realize that he was sold. He's going with good intentions, but he's a little... Then the story with Bilbo Yitzui Aviv. He mixes up the beds, and the pasuk, the lashon pasuk is that he slept, that he was intimate with Bila, that he slept with his mother. That's Chazal say We're not talking about it. We're saying that really he wanted to move his father's bed out of the tent of Rachel because she passed away. He's going to move the bed, now Yaakov's bed, into the tent of Leah, which would have been the good thing to do. That was a good intention, but Yaakov was very upset at it. Which means he did something with the right intention, but he was a little off the mark. Asnas, who's the daughter of Dinah, is a daughter of rape. So that there was a story with Shem is a story which is the worst case of blidas.
His father was Shem?
Yeah. Yeah, she's Bas Dina. Non-consensual. It was not the intention. What the AriZal is basically saying is that when we create something, blidas, when we're doing something and we're not focused on what we're doing, the children or the Matos-Masei shel tzaddikim, whatever the actions that are created through such an activity will create something that's a little bit off the mark, that doesn't have Yisrael. If we're not aligned when we're creating something, we're giving something out, the produce that is created through that relationship will be something that's a little bit misaligned. The machshava of Yaakov, who is not aligned with Rachel, or aligned with Zilpah, or Shem and Dinah were certainly not aligned. because there was a half an alignment. Shem was aligned with Dina was not aligned with Shlir, so it's like Chatzich Shevet Menashe. But if there's an idea of a non-alignment in a relationship, and the non-alignment relationship is not only they physically show up, you have to emotionally show up and mentally show up and completely show up to whatever you're doing. If you show up completely in the action that you're doing and you're fully present in the action that you're doing, the result of that action, the Masei Shel Tzadikim, whether it's a literal child or not, that's what I'm saying, it's always being created, will be something that's perfect alignment. And otherwise, what you're creating is you're creating a story, and Reuven is an example, and God is an example, and Chatz Shevet Menashe is an example. You're creating a reality that's always a little bit misaligned. You're creating someone like Reuven that says, I got almost Eretz Yisrael, but I got a little sidetracked. I just want the Ivar Yarden. Whether it was good intention or bad intention, that's not relevant. You got mamish to the point, and you messed up. You got it almost there, and you veered off. This is the klipa that's been created. This is the negativity that's created. This, even though the AriZal doesn't say this clearly, obviously you can tease it out from the AriZal because he talks about blidas. It seems more to in the Megala Mukas where he brings on in the AriZal. I'm just going to read you very quickly. I'm sorry I didn't make copies of it, but you can see this in a second. And he says that when it says Pachas Kamayim, when it talks about Reuven, it's Pachas Kamayim. Koy al Yirur Yaakov shoy mechaven l'Rachel v'hibu barka v'hini Leah v'nimsa shasa b'koy zeh v'eina b'koy sacher. This is the Megala Mukas is saying this. Lo nitzach afilu b'shtei nosav. The Gemara says even b'shtei nosav it's not good. Nimsa shenivgem Reuven b'mishkas aviv. Reuven was created from this pagam, from this alignment. Yeah. And therefore, it was not connected. And then, it's the it doesn't even say by zilpa vatar. There's no process. It says vatel zilpa. It doesn't say vatar, because this was all created in this condition. And he says that's why gambli das is bugad. It's treason. Yeah. This is a gewaltige word. Now, what we have in Torah Sari. Yeah.
Is it almost like a sabotage?
It's a sabotage.
At the very end, it's a sabotage.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sabotage. Yeah. Look at the next page, Mem Dalet. We'll go to the Amlet from Mem Dalet. So we're talking about Moitzi Zera, a person is giving over the seed, which means a person is giving over themselves. And if you actually look in Lashon HaZohar, when the Zohar talks about Yichud, it talks about Berusa, Beyichuda, Bechedva. It has to be a real connection that your whole presence, your nefesh, your ruach, your neshama, your whole self has to be aligned. This is all talking about, and therefore when you create, in the Torah Sari, it's talking about a creation of literal children, like the physical children of Reuven and God and Chatz Shevet Menashe. But the Torah of Shem says that this thing of Moitzi Zera and Chas Shalom is Moitzi Zera Levatala is not only talking about a yichud between a ish v'ishtay, because Hamedaber b'loy machshava. You have it, Bemdalad? Hamedaber b'loy machshava u'k'moy shemoitzi zera levatala rachman litzlan. If you talk and you don't have machshava, it's Moitzi Zera Levatala. Why is it Moitzi Zera Levatala? Ki machshava, it's a lot of Hushir Kai Mishlema. Before we get to this, first, it's very simple. If you say words, what's not a machshava? What's not a zera levatala? What's not a zera levatala? Not zera levatala is that it's b'das. You have intention. I say I have intention now to create a yichud with my spouse, right? What's the intention? The intention is to create love, to create good feelings in the home. Whatever the mitzvah, whatever you're doing, there's an intention. I'm going into this action because there's an intention of creating some type of connectivity with this. It's not the shat nefesh, I'm doing it, I don't even have machshava when I'm doing it. That's why it shouldn't be a shikr, it shouldn't be a sleep. These are all because you have to do this with intention. You're doing this with the kavanah. So when you're doing something with the kavanah, your machshava is aligned now with your mitzvah. Whatever you're giving out of your energy, whatever you're giving out of your body is in alignment. You have the machshava, you have the thought, and now the thought is coming down, is going through you. Dibur is a form of Eitzah Zera. Why is it Eitzah Zera? It's like it's Zera. What is it? There's moist of Zera and there's moist of your mouth. It's the same thing. It's the Brisam Oyer and Brisam Adaber is part of the same thing. Brisam Saim. Why? Because when a person speaks, they're giving the possibility to create something. I'm creating something. If I speak to you and I speak to you with intention, I give you something good, it's good. So you have something to create. You have a building. You have a structure. You have something that's being created. If I tell you something that's positive, I create something positive. If I'm talking, I'm mazriya. That's what you're doing when you're talking. When you're talking, you're mazriya zera. You're taking the koyach of yourself. You're giving it over what you think, and you're giving it over to the other person to be a katama yifrach. It should flower. When you talk b'li machshava, because you don't have intention, your mind is one thing. You're just running your mouth. When you're running your mouth, you might say Zara. It's the same thing. You're just empty something that doesn't have a recipient, doesn't have a giver. So this is what the AriZal is saying, that we're talking about Moitz Zer, we're talking about a Yichud in Ishu Ishtoi. The Baal Shem says talk about every single dibur. Because it's Levatala, it's wasted. You're wasting your words. What are you doing? You're wasting your words. You're wasting your koyach. He wants to say that machshava is a full world. It's not a machshava. Okay, so you have a machshava. Okay, so you're 30. He's saying the machshava is actually it's an entirety. The world of machshava is a whole thing. It's a binyan shleima. And the Eitzah Zera, the dibur, is a pol yoytze, is like a derivative of the machshava. A correct dibur is what's going on in your mind is now becoming revealed in your dibur. Let's say we're talking about the yichud of ish v'ishtoi. We're saying that the yichud of ish v'ishtoi in the true connection is in the machshava, and that's why I say en kisha el das. You need the das. The das is I want to connect, and now because I want to connect, this is the mice that does the connection. But the machshava builds the whole surah of the expression of the itzas. The same thing also with dibur. If I talk and I just talk for no reason, then I'm taking my dibur and I'm wasting it, because my machshava is really the koyach of the dibur is actually in the machshava. The machshava is where everything occurs. The dibur should just be the tool that allows to express what's going on in the machshava. Because machshava same Torah. It says Beis HaZivug, and here the Baal Shem doesn't say v'ishna acheres. It says b'davar acher. If you're not thinking about what you're doing, forget about the whole Torah. You have to be daite, and you shouldn't be thinking about. We're not talking about loot thoughts. We're not talking about machshava zor. It's not talking about this. Not thinking about what you're doing. You're not present. You're moiled ben tamuras. The energy, the koyach that you're bringing into this world are disjointed. Disaligned, chaotic energy that's following you. That's what it says. Therefore, if you don't have machshava, zivug doesn't zivug, because really the real zivug, the real connectivity is really in the mind, and the action should be an expression of what's going on in the mind. Dibur is the haylada, is the outer birth of the machshava, of the original thought. And the truth is, it's not only just a theoretical, you have the machshava. Machshava also, if you really think about before what you speak, even machshava, you have a way to structure your whole machshava in your mind. There's oisius. Because the dibur is a chayes. Remember we learned a few weeks ago, that the dibur is a chayes adam. The dibur is where the koyach HaMakaya actually enters into the person, the koyach HaDibur. Hevel Elyon, yeah, and Nishmas Chaim and Ruach Mamala, a person comes to koyach HaSpeech. So speech is the koyach HaMedaber. That's what makes a human. That's where your chayes of being a human being is most expressed in your words. And if you speak words that don't have meaning, It's not connected to the machshava. It's Moshe Zedel Vatala. If you're not present to what you're saying. Okay, let's go to this next fine test. So what the Baal Shem Tov is saying, that we have to make sure that we're present, that we're aligned, and we're makash our machshava to our ma'aser. Yisrael chanech zalikim Amar b'sein AriZal. Kufayin test. Yeah, that's I think on the next page. This is the guy I think from the shtick from the Toldos, no? Yeah, it's a Toldos. Yeah, it's a Toldos. Yisrael chanech. Okay. Chanoich tefer menalim hoya v'chol tefira tefira hoya meyachid kutshe bricha v'shchintei. So the Medrash says, is a Medrash, it's not in the Medrash, but it's a later Medrash. The Medrash says, V'yisal chanoich es Elikim ve'enena. That Chanoich was walking with Elikim, and he's no longer. What's Shat, he's no longer. What was he doing? What was the V'yisal chanoich es Elikim? That he walked with Elikim. So it says, Chanoich tefer menalim. Chanoich was basically a shoemaker. He's a cobbler. And he was stitching the shoe, the top on the bottom part of the shoe, and through stitching the bottom part of the shoe, he was miyacha kutzbricha v'shchinte. This is what the Mekubalim bring down many times in this pasuk. So, I just want to say very quickly, you'll see how the Baal Shem Tov reads this. In classic, it's brought in Asar Mamaris, I think it's brought in many Svarim, this idea. So when they talk about that there's two parts of the shoe. There's the upper part of the sole, the lower part of the sole. I said the shoe and the sole. And so the upper part represents like the kutshibrichu, the transcendence. The lower part represents the physical world. And yacha kutshibrichu shchinta, you're making big yichudim from the higher and lower worlds. What is he doing? Some type of yichud in a very abstract world. So Bisol Salanta once said, I remember I told you this word, yeah? Bisol Salanta once said that pshat is, he's brought on no Yisrael. That he says pshat is a chazal as kipshute. Mamish kipshute. That's the yichud. Someone gives you a shoe to make. If you're a cobbler, if you're a shoemaker, someone says, fix my shoe. You know what your kavanah should be in fixing the shoe? You know what the highest kavanah you can do in fixing the shoe if you're a shoemaker? To fix the shoe. That's the highest kavanah. Yeah. The guy gave you $10 to fix the shoe. That's what you're doing. You're not thinking about a psashayel and a shagasai and a ktsas. You're thinking about fixing the shoe. And when it says it means he was toy for the top part of the shoe, the lower part of the shoe, with a lot of kavanah. You know what a lot of kavanah? A lot of kavanah to make sure it sticks. Not a lot of kavanah to make sure that the shoe holds itself to be a shoe. But the truth is, you'll see this is a Bisol, this is a derech hamusar. But you see the Baal Shem Tov Kemat says the same thing with different oisias, but he says he's going to say the same thing because Baal Shem Tov wants to say that the ikir of a person is there has to be present. And the outer expressions of self, whether it's in physical connections or speech, your outer expressions has to come from a place of alignment where your machshava is mekusha to yedibur, yedibur is mekusha to yemaisa. It's all aligned and connected, and it flow. What it means, it says that eventually he became matartan, sar shalolim. This is the medrash over there says that he was cobbling, he was bringing the two pieces of shoes together, and eventually, when it says Veinenu, means he transcended and became a malach, became an angel. And he became Matar Sar Shalolim. What does it mean, Kachu? The Machshava Nikra Ein Soif Aviyah. V'hamaisa Hu Aleph Daled Nun Yud. The Shem Hashem is Shem Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Shem Hashem, Yud Kei Vavke, is in Lifi Erech. How do we say Yud Kei Vavke today? Aleph Daled Nun Yud, right? So we pronounce Yud Kei Vavke Aleph Daled Nun Yud. So the connection between Yud Kei Vavke and Aleph Daled Nun Yud is be'erech the machshava to the dibur. One is the outer, like loy kasheni nichtav ani nikra. There's the nikra, right? We call it Aleph Daled Nun Yud, but ani nichtav is Yud Kei Vavke. So nichtav is the way it's in the machshava, and nikra, the way it's actually pronounced, is Aleph Daled Nun Yud. So the machshava nikra ain't soif baruch hu. So when it says kutshabrichu ain't soif, That's the machshava. That's the thought. Va'amaisa al daldun yud. Kushem mechaber amaisa machshava. Be'es asiyas hamaisa. When a person actually has intention to the action that they're doing, they're present in their thoughts in the action that they're doing. That is yichud kutsh b'chinte. That's what it is. I'm here. I'm present. It's lamer ki machshava nikra chachma koyachma. That you should make kasher your machshava to your ma'aser. If not, ein b'shoel tevis ein b'sham shlos no ma'alam. That goes backwards and forwards. So it's lemish im ein ma'amin b'zev. It's not because os ein b'shoel das v'cheshvan. Then you do things without a das v'cheshvan. If you're not going to do that, you don't believe that it's possible to connect your machshava, then you're not going to be in shol tachtis. That's the whole thing. You want to rise like an angel? Connect your machshava to your ma'aser. You don't connect your machshava to your ma'aser, your maisim, your diburim, the things that are going to come out of you are going to be in a misalignment. The effects of this alignment is going to be, you're going to get to Eretz Yisrael, and right when you're about to get to Eretz Yisrael, you're going to go to a different place. And this is the problem, this is the issue of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. The reason why Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven and Chatz Hashem and Menashe, specifically these Shvatim, almost got to Eretz Yisrael and missed it by a slight point, and therefore they were mechutz l'Eretz Yisrael, and they weren't able to have the Madrigas and Nevuah, and unfortunately, historically, they actually disappeared, these Shvatim. And the only one Shvatim that still has a remnants of the Shvatim that went into Eretz Yisrael, some of them at least, is these people, because they got to the point and they were misaligned. And therefore, if you have to make a tikkun for that, okay, so maybe my parents did something, what am I going to do? So therefore, you have to do it for yourself. You have to make sure. There's a tikkun. There's a tikkun for that. How do you make a tikkun for that? You have to make sure that every time you do a ma'isa, don't get caught up in the ma'isa without the machshava. Make sure there's a machshava tchila. I'm here, I'm present, I know what I'm doing, and therefore I do it. Or you get the reason why people get stuck. Let's think another way of thinking about this. The reason why sometimes people get lost in the ma'isa without the machshava, they get caught up in the action and their presence is not there. It's not only that. Yeah, but it's the same. Because they get caught up in the experience. It's like a kid in a candy store. Oh, I love that. Wait a second. You sure that's what you want? The machshava, when you go into something, you have to know, I'm going into this. Know what you're entering into. When you know what you're entering into, you're creating more alignments in the things that you're going to do. There's a vart from it's in one of my older books, but it's a gewaltig. I'll say it again. That the Kotzker. Some mice with the Kotzker, but I think she down some mice, but something like this. The Kotzker asked the Chassid once from the Kabriner. One of the rabbis asked him what was the mile of his rebbe. Did he daven specially? Did he learn what was the greatness of his rebbe? They said actually my rebbe was not special daven, not special learn, not special meisim toivim, nothing. It just whatever he did, he was fully there. If he davened, he davened. If he learned, he learned. If he was doing person chesed, he was doing a person chesed. That's the idea of to really be present and the makash the machshava ma'isa. The tikkun for that is we have to make sure that we think before we talk. We think, a person should be machasha, a person should understand that everything is working and what do I want from this? Why am I going into this? What's the intention that I'm going to enter things with intentionality? And the more you enter things with intentionality, even if you're born a little on the a little energetically, a little on the side, I think we could. On the other side of the Jordan, I think we can create tikkunim for that by following this mahalach of machshava. So this is a very big Torah. That's what it means. Not all. This is the whole world. This is the biggest thing. All what it means is easy to say. I'm thinking about Atzilus. Excellent. It means nothing. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, I'm yachid. I look at the Siddur Hashash. Okay, it's this, that's the address. Okay, I got it. Wait a second. I am here, and I am now doing this, and I'm going to say these words. That's the Shem Yehuda.
So it's calling your presence.
Calling my presence to be here. I'm starting to daven. When you do a mitzvah, I'm present. I'm here. My machshava is here. I'm showing up. I'm not just shaking a lulav. I'm present. I'm not just davening. I'm present. Everything. I'm doing something. I'm present.
Is that why in Chabad they don't say L'Shem Yichud? Because they already have hisbonenus to be a present, meaning to be.
Alter Rebbe felt that if you say L'Shem Yichud one time, it's going to be for the whole day.
So when do you say it?
Before Baal Shama.
He was present from morning to night.
Yeah, he said that his chassidim will be very hard chassidim. That you do it one time in the morning and you're good for the whole day. That's the Shem Yichud. So unlike the Noda Yehuda that had an issue with the Shem Yichud.
Divrei Chaim gave him
Yeah, Divrei Chaim is a very famous story, but the chassidim Yichol Shaloi, but he wrote. But it's got some people say it was actually not talking about chassidim mamash. It was talking probably about Shabtai. Either way, L'Shem Yichud means not himmlish l'zachen. It also means, but if you're makricht in the himmel, if you like disappear in the heavens and you're not present on this earth, then you missed the whole thing. Loi b'shemaim, exactly. Kipshutay. Loi b'shemaim. That's right. And that's the matzah.
There may have been a question.
Okay, gesundheit. But
Can we ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. I'm gonna please cut me off if I'm asking something that was already covered because I did miss the first 20 minutes or 25
yeah,
minutes.
so it was covered already.
I figured. But something that struck me very interesting is the idea that we conquer the 7 nations before we get into Eretz Yisrael, which I think you did say something to that effect.
Yeah.
We also have like the Sheva Minim. It almost seems something is already embedded in our journey that it's only going to be 7 until Mashiach time. Like
That's
you
correct.
said,
That's
you don't
correct.
get full consciousness. I'm wondering, like,
Until now.
you know, and yet,
Until now, this generation.
Oh, like as if we have some special kalach.
No, we're not special. We're standing on generations of people. We're like, like midgets on top of giants, but we're still standing higher.
So you're saying we can glean more,
more moichin,
enlightenment and consciousness
Correct.
because of our.
Correct. Now, I was going to say that in the beginning we were going to learn the Torah of Shem, but I went in a different direction because but the Baal Shem Tov, actually, there's a lot of Torah. The Baal Shem Tov says that dafka and chutz la'aretz, a person can have higher madregas. Because in Eretz Yisrael, it's sort of like you're sitting in the king's palace. So there's a certain regimen, how you do things. You have to show up with a certain garment, certain clothes, certain time to meet the king. Like Balach Basada, the same idea, like the king's in the field. But in chutz la'aretz, and that's why some tzaddikim say that's why the Baal Shem didn't go to Eretz Yisrael. And even some tzaddikim that went to Eretz Yisrael, they right away left. Like Nachum came to Eretz Yisrael, and he left the next day, or a few days later. There was a thing that they realized that the biggest hasagas that they can have now is actually outside of Eretz Yisrael, because it's in the Chum. But now we're entering a glimmer of Mashiach. And a glimmer of Mashiach, we have Moichin. So that's the highest Madrega. And the real highest Madrega, according to what we talked about in the beginning of the thing with AriZal, was the real Madrega is that there's an aliyah, a nukva de bria in Olam Atzilas on the level of Baal. But the highest Madrega is actually the whole world is lifted. The whole world itself is lifted. When the whole world is lifted itself, then everything can be transformed to Olam Atzilas. One of the differences between the Torah Ari and Torah Baal Shem, this is written about in the illuminated book, is that in Torah AriZal, we're always miled in its tzotzis. We're elevating the sparks of the object. So we're elevating the ruchni of the Gashmi. In Torah Baal Shem, which is a huge chiddush in Torah Tzoid, is that in Torah Baal Shem is you're not only elevating the spark of something, you're elevating the thing itself. Which means that there's a transformation of the object itself. That when a person takes an esrog, you're not saying that the esrog has a nitzah of kedusha. When you're eating, this talk about Yudke Vavke, which is a Yichud Kutcher Brichon Shchinte, the same idea, right? Shem Yudke Brichon Shchinte, Yudke Vavke, right? Yudke Vavke is like Kutcher Brichon Shchinte. So the Yichud Kutcher Brichon Shchinte is B'chol Derchech De'eu. B'chol Derchech De'eu in Torah Baal Shem means that in every action, Da, which is Das, Hu, which is Hey Vav, Yudke Vav He. So in every action, your Das is connected to Shchinte, which is Vav He. Right? Yudke Vav Ke is Kutcher Brichon Shchinte. B'chol Derchecha Da'ehu is Da Hey Vav. So your Das is connected to Shchinte. So B'chol Derchecha Da'ehu means like this. B'chol Masech L'Shem Shemayim, every action you do L'Shem Shemayim means that you're doing this action L'Shem Shemayim. So you're eating for the intention of making something holy. B'chol Derchecha Da'ehu means the eating itself is holy. The action itself is holy. If I'm doing this with the right intention, I'm miyachid kutcher brichas shchita in eating.
Simply what? To have sustenance,
Thanking Hashem for giving me life. I'm alive. I'm breathing. I'm singing Hashem's praise in the action that I'm doing myself. In the fact that I'm eating, it's kvayt shemayim. If I eat with intention, now everything is kvayt shemayim. Whether you eat with, but the fact that your digestive system is working is kvayt shemayim. The fact that when you're hungry you eat and all of a sudden you become satisfied is kvayt shemayim. Everything in this world, kol neshim neshima, is the halakha. Kol neshim neshima, the halakha doesn't mean it's an obligation. Is the halakha. Every time a person is taking a breath, it's the hill of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem's koyach is being revealed and the person is being alive. So if you understand that every single moment being alive, the aliveness of self, is the hill of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the act of eating itself, if you do this with intention, you understand what you're doing, is yichud kutcher brichas shchita. And I'm present, I'm eating. When you eat, eat. Don't eat, I shouldn't say that because I do that a lot, but when you eat, because eating is not my sugya. It's not. I don't care about food. It's not a sugya. But if people like to eat, you really like to enjoy it. Every bite, taste all the tastes and say, thank you Hashem for making the deliciousness of all these savory and sweet and all these tastes to come together. And taking an apple and it's. I told you the words from the Kotzker. The Kotzker once met a friend of his, a student that he learned with in yeshiva. And the person said, me and you learned yeshiva together. You became the Kotzker and I became a simple cobbler. A person that wasn't the kutcher brichas shchita and cobbling. So what's the difference? So the Kotzker was sitting there, was an apple on the table. He said, here, take an apple, eat the apple. So the guy said, what are you? He says, I don't know. You're hungry? So yeah, I'm taka hungry. He says, okay, so you're hungry, eat the apple. So he took the apple, made a bracha, and ate the apple, and then the Kotzker ate the apple. He said, that's the difference between me and you. So what's the difference between me and you? We both ate the apple, both ate the bracha. He says, you ate the apple because you're hungry. You had hungry, you ate the apple. I ate the apple to thank Hashem. I want to thank Hashem. I want to be mahal Hashem that Baruch creates. I want to eat the fruit and recognize that it's Baruch Atah Hashem, that I'm shachav elikus and eating the A's. And that's why I ate the apple. Are you doing it because there's a lack, a chesarn, or are you doing it to reveal Hashem's praise? That's the difference between me and you. This is a way to live. This is a way to live.
And this aligned with Ramdu's concept of spiritual alchemy?
That what?
Like turning everything into Atzilus.
Yeah. And he uses those words?
Yeah, alchemy.
No, alchemy I know, but he uses turning everything to Atzilus. He uses the words?
I think he does.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
That's the same word. For sure.
Aleph, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know. Alchemy, they're all into alchemy, but I didn't know how to use it. Atzilus. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
How come they ask questions? No one else asks questions. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, firstly, I wanted to know which text are you learning from?
I think of Shlomo. If you email them, you have it on a PDF, Shlomo?
I do have it on PDF, yeah.
So maybe you can send it to whoever came to the.
Yeah, if you email.
No, how did they know? How did they get into this thing?
No,
how did these people get into this thing?
They're through Joyce.
Through Joyce? Okay,
so Joyce, so send it to Joyce, and she'll give it to you.
PDF to Joyce.
Okay.
Ask Joyce for the PDF, I'll send it to her.
Fine. And we'll send it to people before the share also.
Yeah. Amir Tashem next time.
Okay.
So I had a quick question when you were discussing earlier regarding the Partsufim, which, by the way, I really don't understand the concept at all. It's a very, very deep concept, and I'm just starting to learn it. But the most obvious thing that stands out to me when discussion comes up about Partsufim is that when you start talking about the higher Partsufim, like Atik Yomin or Arich Anpin, why are the higher Partsufim always male? Why is there not a feminine parallel to the higher Partsufim?
There is actually. There's 6 Partsufim, but the Rashash talks about 12 Partsufim, and they're parallel. There's the Zachar and the Keva, but there is. The more known ones are Taka male for some reason, because that's what AriZal talks about.